The Broncos lost. Hello everybody, my name is Jackie and welcome to Prairie Sports Talk, the podcast where we talk about sports that directly impact the Canadian Prairie. And today is April 25th, 2024. We have a lot to talk about, to say the very least. So we're going to open up by talking about the less than ideal ending to the Swift Current Broncos season. We're also going to talk about the supposed struggles of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. in the MLB and why I think these struggles are being blown out of proportion and why I don't think they're that big of a deal. We're also going to be talking about the NHL playoffs and why I think it will be an all-Canadian Stanley Cup. We are also going to talk about some responses that I got on my clip of me talking about my, we'll say, frustrations of the the Arizona Coyotes moving to Utah and not Quebec City. And we are going to close out with a brief mention of some interesting CFL news that just broke on April 24th. We got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. So, that's it. The Broncos are out. They lost 4-1 against the Moose Jaw Warriors. Now, despite the fact the Broncos are out, I do want to congratulate two Broncos on being able to continue their season. Owen Pickering, who has been called up to the Penguins farm team, and Connor Geekie, who has been called up to the Coyotes farm team. Massive congratulations to them both, and good luck to them in the AHL playoffs. But let's talk about the WHL playoffs. So, I fully expected the Broncos to win this series. I really did. The Broncos have a very skilled team, and even now I feel like the roster is better than Moose Jaw's roster. But at the end of the day, Moose Jaw just wanted it more. They outplayed them in 4 out of 5 of the games they played. They outworked them in those games as well. And at the end of the day, it just looked like the Broncos were incredibly demoralized for the majority of the series. After the Broncos split the games on the road, where they won Game 1 7-2, and then lost Game 2 by the same margin, I think when they lost that game, that was the turning point. The Broncos went from flying high, winning the first 5 playoff games that they played this season, to all of a sudden getting just embarrassed in Game 2. Game 3, they showed some signs of life, but it wasn't enough for them to win. And then in Game 4, there was one very specific turning point in that game, in my opinion. There was a shot from Connor Geekie. I can't remember if it was early third period or late second, but it was somewhere around there. And it appeared to miss the net to almost everyone, but one ref stopped the play and said it was a goal. The Broncos celebrate, the crowd erupts, Geekie looks surprised but incredibly happy, and vibes are good in Swift Current. And then they reveal the goal. The puck never crossed the line. It was no goal. The Broncos never got their momentum back after that. It was painful. The Broncos looked like, coming into Game 4, they were already somewhat deflated, but when that goal got disallowed, it erased any chance that the Broncos had at winning in Game 4, and with Game 5 in Moose Jaw, there was no road where they won. The Broncos needed to be headed back to Moose Jaw after winning at least one home game. They couldn't do that, unfortunately. The Broncos looked deflated and they were unable to fight through the adversity. It's incredibly unfortunate. I really do feel like this is a Broncos team that really could have done some real damage in the playoffs, and I believe they are the only team in the WHL playoffs who could have beat the Saskatoon Blades. Now the next round, round 3, has been locked in. It will be the Saskatoon Blades with home ice advantage up against the Moose Jaw Warriors, and it will be the Prince George Cougars against the Portland Winterhawks with Prince George having home ice advantage. I think that Saskatoon and Prince George are both going to win, and I think Saskatoon will win the Edge North Cup in 6 games. I also don't see any reason that the Saskatoon Blades won't be able to go on to the Memorial Cup and win it. I think they're going to be the Memorial Cup champions this season. And it's really heartbreaking as a Bronco fan to watch 2 Saskatchewan rivals go to the conference finals. But at the end of the day, both of these teams deserved it. They wanted it more than both of the teams they went up against. Saskatoon wanted it more than Prince Albert and Red Deer, and Moose Jaw wanted it more than Swift Current and Brandon. At the end of the day, the teams that deserved it won it. I don't think this is the end for the Broncos, though. I feel like despite the fact that we are likely losing some key members of our team next season, namely our 20-year-olds such as Tyson Galloway, Ryan McCleary, and Caleb Rostock, I feel like that could be a lot worse. Now, granted, they're likely losing some 19-year-olds as well. Connor Geeky will likely end up being on the Tucson Roadrunners for the Utah's the NHL team in Utah. He will be on their farm team in the AHL, the Tucson Roadrunners. And Owen Pickering's likely going to stay in Scranton as well with the Pittsburgh Penguins farm team. So that's 2 more very big gaps, and I would not be surprised if our starting goalie Reed Dick ended up going to Providence and playing for the Providence Bruins up there, or down south, sorry, with the Boston Bruins farm team. Those are some very notable gaps, to say the very least. But I feel like that there is still a non-zero chance that Geeky comes back next season. I don't trust the Arizona management to make the right decision right away with him. I think if he comes back, it will not be because he's not good enough. It will be just a stupid decision from the managers. But with him now being called up for the playoffs, I can't see it happening. But I also feel like the Broncos have enough people coming up in the system where these holes can be mostly filled. Like, obviously you can't fill the hole of a Reed Dick or a Connor Geeky, but you can at least get someone in their position who has the ability to produce enough that the hole at least appears to be filled. I don't understand why analysts are so focused on like these blocks of 10 games in the MLB. The MLB season is 162 games long. Forget how a player does in the last 10 games. Forget about how they do in the next 10 games. How are they doing in 50 games? How are they doing in 100 games? How are they doing after 162 games? Focus on the big picture. And I just don't understand a lot of coverage around baseball. Look, I am very new to the baseball community. I'm still learning the game and the culture around it. But this is one thing that I haven't been able to wrap my head around at all. Baseball has so many stats, especially compared to basically any other pro league. Yes, I get the concept of moneyballing. I get that But let me put it this way. If a team is producing, if a player is producing, what's the issue? Now, to that, people may be saying, oh, well, at the top of the show, you mentioned you were going to talk about Vladdy, and now you're talking about the MLB, so obviously you're talking about Vladdy. Yes, I am. And people keep saying he's not producing. I disagree. I do. I think his production has just been not necessarily in the ways people expected it. So what? He doesn't have 10 home runs yet. So what? Big deal. At the end of the day, he's still getting on base. He's still getting home. He's still batting runners home. He's still one of the best defensive players in the league. I'd argue he's the best first baseman in the league. I don't get why people are just so focused on when a player struggles. But then when that same player is back to their normal selves, like not like above average, above what they're expected to do, they're back to just what they are expected to do, everyone shuts up. If you're going to talk about the bad, you need to talk about the good. So when Vladdy inevitably breaks out of this supposed slump he's in, which people say he is, even though I don't think he is, when he gets back to what everyone expects him to be, I want to see just as much media coverage on how he broke out of it. Mark my words. There will not just be a Canadian team in the Stanley Cup. There will not just be a Canadian team lifting the Stanley Cup. This season, there will be 2 Canadian teams in the Stanley Cup. I have Edmonton and Toronto in the Stanley Cup, with Edmonton winning in 7. These are 2 very evenly matched teams, and I feel like they are teams that, even if they struggle at some point in the playoffs, they should be able to overcome any major issues they have. I will go into a little bit more of my predictions a little later in this segment, but I think that Samsonov is just barely good enough to get the Leafs to the Stanley Cup. He hasn't quite been that franchise goaltender a lot of people in Toronto and Leafs fans in general hoped he would be, but he's good enough to get to the Stanley Cup. I don't think they'll get to the Stanley Cup because of him, but I do think he will be enough to get them there. And it's the same with Edmonton. Stuart Skinner, give him 4, 5, maybe 6 years, he'll be one of the best goalies in the NHL. But he isn't yet. Not yet. Skinner has a lot of potential and he's a very skilled goaltender. He's just not at his full potential yet. So I think that his play will be enough to get Edmonton to the Stanley Cup. And I think they will win it, but they won't win it because of him. They'll win it because of players like McDavid, like Draisaitl, even Hyman, who's coming off an insane 50-goal season and a hat-trick in Game 1 that I think it was like something like over 11,000 hats were thrown. Oh my God, Edmonton. That's honestly really cool. Also, can I have some of the hats? I collect hats. Please? No? Okay. Worth a shot. But anyway, here are my predictions. So I have Vegas beating Dallas. I have Winnipeg beating Colorado. This is the one prediction I regret because I have Vancouver beating Nashville. I made these predictions before the playoffs officially got underway. I forgot to share them, but I wasn't going to go back and retroactively change them to make myself look better. I want to be honest, and I want to share my genuine predictions. So I kept Vancouver beating Nashville even though Demko is hurt, and I now think Nashville will beat them. And then of course I have Edmonton beating LA. In the second round, I have Winnipeg beating Vegas and Edmonton beating Vancouver. And then Winnipeg and Edmonton in the Western Final with Edmonton winning. And then in the East, I have Florida beating Tampa, the Leafs beating the Bruins, the Rangers beating the Capitals, and Carolina beating the Islanders. I then think that the Leafs will beat the Panthers and the Rangers will beat the Hurricanes. I think the Leafs will also beat the Rangers. And again, I think that there will be a 7-game Stanley Cup series between the Oilers and the Leafs, where the Oilers just barely beat them. I think it will come down to the play of McDavid versus Matthews above all else. It would appear I have kicked a hornet's nest. Oops. So, if you guys didn't see my last episode, I talked about the Arizona Coyotes moving to Utah. And why I was frustrated by that, because I feel like Quebec City is much more deserving of an NHL team than anywhere else in North America right now. That has since become the clip of that has now become my most viewed video on my channel. At recording, it has been less than 5 days since I recorded that. And it is nearly at 130 views, and I only have 25 subscribers. Now I need to emphasize, all the comments were respectful, and I am incredibly grateful for everyone who commented. I really enjoy discussing sports, and that is why I started this podcast, because I enjoy discussing sports. I want to get a conversation started. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some common points that were brought up in the comments. So lots of people pointing out that the NHL likely wouldn't move back to Quebec because of a lack of investors. But to that I say, well, they got an investing group in Winnipeg, which isn't overly that much bigger than Quebec City. Winnipeg has about 700,000 people. Quebec has about 500,000. 200,000, that's a lot by my standards, but I also understand, living in Saskatchewan, my standards of what a big city is very skewed, because my province only has about 1 million people in it. So 200,000 seems like a lot to me, but I also understand in the grand scheme of things with Canadian population, it's not that much. So I feel like that finding an investor or investment group in Quebec City wouldn't be as challenging as people think, because the province of Quebec is very, how do I put this? They're very passionate about their sports teams. Just look at the Habs for NHL example. The Habs, despite going through a rough couple of seasons, still have one of the most passionate fan bases, I'd argue, in all of North American sports. And the resurgence of the fan base in Montreal for the Montreal Alouettes is another great example of this. And although I don't know a whole lot about the MLS, Montreal FC consistently, at least to my understanding, being a consistently profitable team, is more proof of this. Because soccer isn't a very big sport in Canada. It's definitely growing with how many great tournaments the Canadian women's team have had, and with a superstar like Alfonso Davies. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. Like I said, I'm not overly familiar with MLS or really soccer in general. But I feel like Montreal FC is another good example of that Quebec can support a successful sports franchise. And the thing with all those teams, they're all located in Montreal. We all know that the NHL is no stranger to taking risks in new cities. They were the first professional sports team to have a game in Las Vegas, unless you include some very specific examples, such as the CFL's short-lived American expansion, which included a team in Las Vegas, and I believe even the XFL had a game in Vegas at one point in their original incarnation in the early 2000s. But at the end of the day, none of those teams were nearly as successful as the Golden Knights have been. So the NHL shows that the NHL showed that they're not afraid to take a risk in a new city. So take a risk in Quebec City. There is no professional sports team there. Every professional sports team in Quebec, the province right now, is in Montreal. Quebec, they love hockey so much, they have their own junior league. The QMJHL. Even though I don't agree with their rules on fighting, I do need to point out that it is an incredibly successful league, and there are enough teams that, honestly, the OHL and the QMJHL, there's enough teams in both those leagues that kind of puts the WHL to shame. That's not a knock against the dub. I'm just saying, like, the Q is a really good example that Quebec cares enough about sports and hockey in general that I don't think it'd be a big issue trying to find an investor in Quebec. And I think a lot of people felt like I was saying that Salt Lake never deserved a hockey team. That's not what I was saying, and I genuinely apologize if that's what people thought I meant. I am so sorry. I should have thought about my words a lot more carefully than I did. But what I was saying is Salt Lake shouldn't be the next team. Salt Lake can and should have a hockey team down the road. And I want to emphasize, I was saying the same thing about Arizona. My frustrations about a team headed back to Arizona within the next 5 or so years isn't that I don't think Arizona can sustain hockey. I think it can. My issue is that it's going to be the same owner. The owner that has, for lack of a better word, really been an embarrassment to the NHL. And I feel like my phrasing of they chose Utah, saying that repeatedly, could have been phrased a little better. I wasn't saying that the NHL went out of their way to move a team to Utah. I more was, if I'm being honest, I was clickbaiting. Okay? There. I said it. I was clickbaiting. Am I frustrated that the team is going to Salt Lake instead of Quebec? Yes. Do I think Salt Lake City does not deserve a team? No. But do I also think that Quebec should have had a team before Salt Lake? Yes. I hope I cleared up what I meant last episode, and if anyone wants a better explanation on what I meant, leave a comment down below if you're on YouTube, or you could reach out to me on Twitter as well. Link in the description down below. Because like I said, I'm always looking to have a discussion about sports. I live and breathe this stuff. So I enjoy talking sports. So if you want to talk NHL with me, you want to talk about the team moving to Utah, great. Reach out. I'd be more than happy to do so. And just before I wrap up this episode, I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I didn't talk about this, because the CFL has suspended defensive lineman Sean Lemon indefinitely for wagering on games while being a member of the Calgary Stampeders. Yeah, that's less than ideal. Now, there's not a lot of info on this at the moment, at least at time of recording. I will link the tweet where I heard about it first in the description down below. It was from Dave Naylor, and he is probably the most trustworthy name in Canadian football reporting. So the CFL has indefinitely suspended a player that, until today, I consider to be a shoo-in Hall of Famer. And the CFL did the right thing. If Sean Lemon was betting on CFL games, that is a conflict of interest. And if the CFL is serious about having sports betting be a legitimate source of income for the league, they need to make sure players aren't dealing with conflicts of interest like this. We don't need a situation like what happened in the NBA with the Toronto Raptors, with that Porto player supposedly intentionally subbing himself out early so that bets he took on himself for the under would pay out. So the CFL needs to make sure that this kind of thing does not start happening in the CFL. If players are having gambling issues, the CFL needs to give them some form of mental health support. But I'm glad the CFL took action against Sean Lemon. I just wish this had been a little earlier, before Sean Lemon had his comeback with the Montreal Alouettes this season, because in a way that has really, really tainted the Grey Cup for the Alouettes, and that sucks. I feel bad for the Alouette fans. I feel bad for the other players on the team. Sean Lemon made a really stupid move by betting on CFL games while still being involved in the CFL. It's a conflict of interest, plain and simple. And on that sad note, that's everything I have for you guys this week. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify, be sure to follow the 13th Man Podcast Network. I hope you guys had a great day. Hope you guys had a great week. Hope you guys had a great whatever. Stay safe, stay strong. You got this. And this is Jackie Knobs for Prairie Sports Talk, signing off.